Thank you, Eamon. A leading doctor says the government should think about decriminalising drugs because the laws are having no impact on crime or on people's health. Professor Sir Ian Gilmore, he's the outgoing president of the Royal College of Physicians, and he says the drugs laws need to be reconsidered and the blanket ban on substances should be reassessed. Well, right now, banned drugs are split into three categories. People caught with Class A drugs, they face the toughest penalties. If you're convicted of possessing ecstasy, heroin, cocaine or crack cocaine, then you face up to 7 years in jail. Those supplying Class A drugs face a life sentence. Well, amphetamines and cannabis are Class B substances, and sentences range from up to 5 years in jail for possession to 14 years for supply. Well, at the bottom of the scale, steroids and tranquilizers are graded as Class C, and they have jail terms of 2 years for possession and 14 years for supply. There have been mixed results in the battle against drug use. Convictions for trafficking drugs have gone up 10%, but the number found guilty of possession has fallen by 14%. Well, it's not the first time government policy on drugs has been questioned. Professor David Nutt was sacked after demanding a new approach and claiming that alcohol was more harmful than ecstasy. Well, campaigners are divided as to whether the latest calls to decriminalise drug use is the best way forward.
The war on drugs.
Environmental campaigners say the monarch butterfly is in danger of extinction. Severe storms have damaged a woodland sanctuary in Mexico where the butterflies gather in winter. Analysts say a record low number of the creatures have made the journey south, with numbers already threatened by illegal logging in the area. Millions of butterflies usually fly to the region, sometimes from as far north as Canada.
That's awful, all those moths.
They're butterflies, actually.
Are they not all the same thing?
No, they're not the same thing. It's very different.
Terrible.
And it's very sad that they're in danger of extinction.
It's ruined my day. Ghastly.
They're very important.
I'm sure they are, ecologically. Front pages of the papers. She'll kick me under the desk. Angelina Jolie as Marilyn Monroe, and Charlotte has an objection. Well,
I just think she would have to double in size. Marilyn Monroe is a very curvaceous lady, and Angelina Jolie isn't known for her.
Yeah, she was normal size and not a twig.
But has Angelina Jolie not got all the curves in the right places, Lucy?
She's more svelte. I think she's more
No,
sort of...
she's just skinny.
Well, I've seen her in that Lara Croft thing, and she's bursting out of that uniform.
That was ages ago.
That's another story.
That was
anyway,
ages ago.
The story in the Premier League is what, Jacqueline?
Manchester United's title challenge is off to a winning start. They beat newly promoted Newcastle 3-0 at Old Trafford last night.
Does that young boys, do they not have like a French name or something, or a German name that we can call them? Because it just...
No, I think they're called Young Boys.
Oh, it's ridiculous, stupid name. Lucy, weather-wise, what have you got?
Rain, lots of it.
Oh.
I know, it's awful, it really is. We're going to see a good deal of cloud, outbreaks of rain, not feeling much like August, but things do get better as the day goes on.
Need to get a floorboard up to rescue a cat, and Jaden King says probably need a crowbar rather than a screwdriver to get those floorboards up.
I think he just should have taken a taxi, says Obasi in Nigeria. We'll take a break there. Top stories, top of the hour. We're going to talk about clamping very shortly. Before we do that, let's have a look at the front pages of the papers on this Tuesday morning, because the Mail there, for instance, they're one of the newspapers who are claiming a campaign victory with the news that wheel clamping from today on private land is going to be banned. And the new One Show presenter Alex Jones, smiling photograph on the front page. The Sun says a hero driver beat car campers. This was in Wembley. They tried to find him thousands and tow him away, but he stayed in his car for 30 hours because the notice was so small and he didn't realise that he was on land where he could have been clamped. And the Express, very disturbing story, which we'll talk about, features Hannah Bannock. Hannah is a nurse. She was clamped while visiting a cancer patient. And the main story there, pension pots are shrinking at an alarming rate. The Independent leads with Tony Blair's pledge to donate millions of pounds from his forthcoming memoirs to the British Legion. The Telegraph says the former PM is facing questions over how much the charity for injured soldiers will actually receive. The Times reports Mr Blair's close friends say his decision to make the donation has been influenced by his desire to repair his reputation. Tony Blair also on the front page of The Guardian. The lead says the Taliban have called for an inquiry into allegations of civilians being wounded and killed in Afghanistan. The Mirror says calls for a full probe into the death of Dr David Kelly have been stepped up. And the Daily Star leads with claims about Abby Clancy and footballer fiancé Peter Crouch. OK, so Wheel clampers, they're going to be banned from operating only on private land, not council land. More than 2,000 existing clamping licences will be revoked under the plans for England and Wales. Towing away will also be outlawed. With me now, I've got the Chief Executive of the British Parking Association, and that is Patrick Troy.
Good morning, Heyman.
Patrick, what is the British Parking Association and why do we need it?
Well, the British Parking Association represents a variety of different parking companies and local authorities in the United Kingdom. So what we do is we represent the interests of our members, and I have to say...
Who are clampers?
Some of them are clampers, yes. Some of them are ticketers. A number of them manage private land in a variety of ways.
Now, could you tell us what service you feel clamping provides?
Well, I mean, we've lobbied for some time and campaigned with the government to have the law changed in relation to clamping. We want to see regulation of clamping. We want to see the road clampers that you've just featured disappear. And we think there is a way of doing that. We're worried about the prospect of a ban because clamping does have a role to play in managing private land. The government said that one way of dealing with the problem is to ticket vehicles, and that's true, and a lot of our members ticket vehicles on private land in order to manage the land. But you always need that last resort, and the last resort is either clamping or towing away. Even in Scotland, they tow away instead of clamp.
Now, South East Clamping, are they part of your association?
No, they're not.
Right, so these are what you call road clampers then?
So there are a number of road clampers who are unregulated. We have a scheme which we established 2 or 3 years ago because we were fed up with waiting for the government to regulate on this, and we've self-regulated, if you like, and we've said to our members, if you want to be a member of our association, you have to comply with our code of practice. And our code of practice sets out things like the level of charging that operators can make, the amount of signage.
But what a way to make money through misery for very minor offences.
Well, they shouldn't be minor offences. This is about parking on people's land. It's about parking on your drive and on my drive and on housing estate car parks. It's parking on supermarket car parks and things like that. And it shouldn't be disproportionate.
So, sorry, explain to me, supermarket car parks, what's wrong there? What can you possibly do wrong in a supermarket car park?
Well, of course, supermarkets want to see a turnover of parking.
So people go and park for the day, is that what you mean?
So people park for the day, particularly if the car park is close to a railway station, let's say.
Yes.
People will abuse that privilege and they'll park all day.
Now, we're getting reaction, obviously, to this story as it develops this morning. Charlotte, what have you got?
Yeah, I've got one email here, actually, from Dr. Charles Gauci, and he's giving an example of when he was involved in a situation with clamping. He says this change can't come too soon. A few months ago, he was in a taxi, he was dropped outside a restaurant, there were roadworks, very limited parking. As the taxi driver was writing out a receipt, he says a group in identical T-shirts descended on us shouting and screaming. They clamped the vehicle while they were both still in it and the engine was running by saying that they were on private land, and the taxi driver had to pay £500 to release his car.
Well, that's totally unacceptable. And £500 is a ridiculous amount of money to pay for that sort of offence. And that's really what our code sets out, that those sorts of levels of charge shouldn't apply. And that's why we want to see the government regulate this and say, well, what is
not a ban, but regulation?
Regulation, and tight regulation.
What are the problems when this comes into force? What will the problems be then, do you think, for your industry? And
I think the main problem will be for landowners who haven't really had a say in this debate yet. And I think they've got to come forward and say, well, actually, we own private land. We run our land either as car parks or just land that we want to park on. We don't want the public to park on it because there are laws of trespass here as well. And if clamping is banned and if towing away is banned, there's no obvious means of last resort for landowners to protect their land. And that's a concern I think the government needs to think.
Well, we've got the Minister responsible on the programme in an hour's time taking questions, but it does strike me as quite strange that they're prepared to ban clamping on private land but not council land. Why would that be? I
don't know, because it's interesting that the government is the biggest user of clamping in the country through their contract with DVLA. If you don't have a tax on your car, then you clamp, the government will clamp vehicles through their contract.
Well, that's very good. I'm going to write that down. Government biggest user of clamping. So we'll put that to the Minister.
But of course, that's on the public highway.
On the public highway.
And that may be some reason. I don't know what the thinking is behind not banning it on council land. OK, thanks for explaining that. Patrick Troy, he's the Chief Executive of the British Parking Association, and Charlotte standing by to take any further emails you have on that, news@sky.com, or indeed at Sky Charlotte with the Twitter address.
Got sport coming your way. I, for one, can't wait for that today with Jacqueline Beltrao right after the break.
I wonder why that is. We're going to see all the action from the Manchester United's game last night against Newcastle. First game of the season. It was a very good one if you're a United fan. Also the playoff.